If any of you have been exposed to anything that affects your ability to be fair and impartial in this case, please raise your hand. All right, very good. We'll press on. You may call your next witness.
The state calls Dr. Thomas Beaver.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please have a seat. State your full name for the record.
My name is Dr. Thomas Richard Beaver, B-E-A-V-E-R.
Good morning, Dr. Beaver.
Good morning.
What's your profession?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
And tell us what a forensic pathologist is.
Yes, forensic pathologist is a physician who has been specifically trained to determine the cause, manner, and mechanism of death in cases of unexplained death.
And are you a licensed physician?
Yes, sir, I am.
In what states?
I'm licensed in the state of Florida, South Carolina, of course, California, and I didn't renew my West Virginia license this year, and I was previously licensed in Colorado, and I let that expire as well because it's expensive, and I don't practice there.
All right. And how long have you been a forensic pathologist?
I finished training in 1992 and went to work at that time as a forensic pathologist, so it'll be July of 92.
So roughly 29 years?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background, your education, things of that nature?
Certainly. I have an undergraduate degree from the University of California. I have a medical degree from St. George's University School of Medicine. I completed a 5-year residency training program in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology at the University of Colorado, and I completed a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Denver County Coroner's Office. I took the certifying examinations given by the American Board of Pathology in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology and forensic pathology, passing all those exams on the first attempt. So that makes me board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
All right. And when you say board certified, I know you talked about these exams that you passed on the first attempt. Just what does that mean, I guess, in layman's terms, that you're board certified?
So before you can become board certified, you have to complete the requisite training program satisfactorily. So you have to, in my case, I did a 5-year training program to get both anatomic and clinical pathology. Once you complete that training, then you're eligible to take the exam. So you take the exam. The pass rate is less than 50%. In the group of forensic pathologists that took the forensic pathology exam, it was about 50% was the pass rate. To pass all those exams on the first attempt is really unusual.
No, in your 29 years of being a forensic pathologist, have you received any awards? Or special recognition, any honors, things of that nature? Just a short list.
Yeah, so I was appointed to the Crime Lab Council in the state of Florida by the governor. And so that's about the only thing. I don't really seek awards or anything like that, so I don't really promote myself.
And what positions have you held just through your time as a forensic pathologist?
So my first job out of training, I was in a private practice pathology group in Modesto, California. And in that group I covered, I was the only forensic pathologist, so I covered all the counties of Central Florida, Central California. And it won't mean much to you, but it's Stanislaus County, Merced, Amador, Tuolumne, and Calaveras. Those are all little counties in the Central Valley. Modesto is the city, and that's where I would live. Then I moved to Florida, where I became the associate medical examiner in Panama City, Florida. I was there a little bit more than a year, and then I moved to the chief medical examiner position in Daytona Beach. Florida is a medical examiner state. It's divided up into districts, 25 districts. Each district gets a medical examiner appointed by the governor for 2 or 3 year term. And so I was in Daytona Beach for almost 9 years. And then I took a teaching position at Texas Tech University, where I was the director of the Division of Forensic Sciences within the university. In that capacity, not only did I teach medical students and residents, which is what I do now, but I also was the director of their forensic science program, which included an undergraduate track as well as a master's in forensic science.
Were you in California at some point in time?
Yes, so then I was there about 3 years, and then I went to California. My wife had a seizure, and it turned out to be brain cancer, and she wanted to be back home. And so we went to California, took care of her for a while, and then had to go back to work. And I took a position at Alameda County, I was the chief forensic pathologist in Alameda County.
And would that be the Oakland area?
Yeah, that's Oakland, California, a big office. I had
Sure.
22 investigators. I had 8 technicians, 6 clerical staff. We never turned off the lights and never locked the door because we ran 24/7.
How long were you in that area, Alameda County?
Yeah, I was in Alameda County for about 3 years, and finished my kids all out of the nest, and they were all out on their own lives. And I decided to go back to Florida, and I took a job in the Florida Keys, and I was the medical examiner for District 16, which is the Florida Keys, the Monroe County.
No.
And
And if I can, I'm going to kind of focus this now to South Carolina.
Sure, absolutely.
How long have you been in South Carolina?
Since June of 2018.
Okay, and what is your position here?
I'm an associate professor at Medical University of South Carolina.
Okay. And in the position as associate professor at MUSC, as I'll call it, you perform autopsies?
Yes, sir, I do.
What is an autopsy?
So an autopsy is an examination of the body externally and internally. It's a systematic examination. So there's certain things that we just do the same way every single time. It starts with the external. So we're looking on the surface of the body for evidence of therapy, scars and identifying marks, evidence of injury, and then just a general condition of the body. The internal examination, we make incisions on the body so that we can access all the body cavities and organs. The organs are removed individually and sequentially and dissected and biopsied. We take photographs the entire process, so every step of the way we take pictures. So.
And then I'll ask this question because we'll get a little bit more in depth in a couple minutes about that. Roughly how many autopsies have you performed in the last 29 years?
Oh, yes, sir. I don't keep a count, but it's probably 10,000 and it may be more.
Okay. Have you been declared as an expert in the field of forensic pathology?
Oh, yes, sir, I have.
Okay. In the multiple states where you practiced?
Yes, many times.
And in South Carolina as well?
Yes, sir.
All right. Your Honor, I'd like to offer Dr. Beaver as an expert in forensic pathology.
And he is so qualified.
Okay. No, thank you. Now we can get into a few more specifics. Now, you were talking about kind of the methodology that you use when you perform autopsies.
Yes, sir.
And you talked about pictures a moment ago and just how in depth you kind of remove organs and how you kind of systematically go through that process, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, what I'll ask is this. With that methodology, you first said that you take pictures.
Yes.
Okay, and you detail, like you said, systematically the organs. And that's just the process that you go through in every autopsy.
Yes.
Why do you take pictures?
So the pictures are taken to document injuries. I think the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, probably is accurate here. And and it's oftentimes easier to show someone something than it is to explain it by words. Now with the availability of digital photography and very good cameras and easy storage, we take the photographs that we would to explain what we see.
Did you have do you take x-rays?
Yes, sir, I do. Take x-rays. In this case, we took 13 x-rays.
Okay, well, and now we're going to focus on this case in just a moment, but you generally take x-rays as part of your process?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now let's focus then. Let's get to it. So did you have an opportunity to perform an autopsy on Samantha Josephson?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. And the process that you talked about, that was what you followed as you performed that autopsy, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So tell us, let's start with photographs. You said you normally take photographs. Did you do that here?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how many photographs did you take?
170 photographs.
Okay. Why so many?
There were a lot of injuries.
Okay. And x-rays, I was just mentioning. Did you take x-rays?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many?
I took 13 x-rays.
Why is that?
So we take x-rays in the case of gunshot wounds as well as stab wounds. And so I had initially seen sharp force injuries, stab wounds. So that makes me think that I need to take x-rays in this case. And I'm looking for perhaps pieces of the knife that have broken off. When the knife hits bone, it will either bend or break. So many times...
So you're saying steel will bend or break if it hits a bone?
Yes, if there's enough force applied and the knife blade is not sturdy enough, it will bend, or else maybe the tip will break off. When the tip breaks off, we can match that to a weapon if we recover it.
Now, as Ms. Josephson was presented to you in March of 2019, what was her body weight and height?
Yes, she was 69 inches tall, and she's weighed 160 pounds.
All right. And you alluded to some of this a moment ago. When she presented you, what was it that you saw that grasped your immediate attention?
There were two things first. The first thing was that she had an extensive amount of insect activity on the surface of the body. And the second thing, pretty much at the same time, was that she had many stab wounds over the surfaces of the body.
Now, you talked a moment ago about, you said sharp force injuries.
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain to the jury how you characterize sharp force injuries.
So in the universe of injuries for forensic pathologists, things are either blunt force or sharp force. And sharp force injuries are broken down into two types. Incised wounds, which are wounds that are longer than they are deep. So these would be, some people might refer to them as a scratch or a cut. And then there are stab wounds, and the stab wounds are deeper than they are wide or long. So these are wounds that are where the knife has gone in, there's made a little cut in the skin, but the blade has gone deeper into the body. So
Would some people call those puncture wounds?
Puncture wounds, yes. Stab wounds. So I won't know, when I first see a sharp force injury, I won't know whether it's classified as a stab wound or an incised wound until I probe the wound and see how deep it goes.
All right. And when you probe the wound, explain to the jury what you mean by probing a wound.
So I have a metal probe that it's like a thin piece of metal, and I put that into the wound, and I try to follow the path of the wound, and then and I mark the spot on the skin with my fingers by grasping it. And when I pull it out, I can then match it to a ruler, and I can see exactly how far the probe went in.
Now, again, you captured all of these things that you did by way of taking photographs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And would that assist you in explaining to the jury, what you observed and why, and your findings as a result of what you observed?
Yes, sir.
Now, I'd like to first begin by showing you a series of pictures. And you talked about just kind of the methodology you use. As you performed this autopsy, did you, because of the number of stab wounds as you mentioned, did you do them in groupings? Did you try to group them differently than you normally would?
Yes, sir. Once the number gets up around 100, it really makes the autopsy report and any description very bulky. So I try to group them where they're closely together and related. So Yes, I'll group them into groups of 5 or 6 or 8 in a certain area.
And you mentioned the number 100. Were you able to count the number of stab wounds as you observed Ms. Josephson's body?
Yes, it's over 100, I think somewhere around 120. But gets to a point where it's not really, it doesn't really add much to the report.
Court's indulgence, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's, for purposes of just organization, I prefer to go, let's go head to toe.
Okay.
So that we can talk about some of these matters. I'm going to show you, and at this point I'll show them to you. You can, in my question to you, I'm just going to explain the process to make sure we're clear. Do not show these to the jury as I show them to you. I want you to tell me if you recognize them first, then we'll talk about them before we do any publishing of any pictures. Is that?
I understand.
That process?
I understand.
All right. So, Your Honor, I'm going to approach the witness.
Just tell me.
They are states 347, states 346, states 342, and states 341.
Repeat that for me, please.
I'm sorry, 347, 346, 342, and 341.
Okay.
And Dr. Beaver, do you recognize these photographs? I do not publish those on jury.
Yes, sir, I recognize these photos.
Okay, so let's start, if you'll start with the photograph on top. Please refer to that exhibit number, and let's just talk about what you observed in that photograph.
Okay, so I'm looking at exhibit number 3, or is it 341? 341?
Yes, sir.
And it's a photo taken at autopsy. The body is in the supine position.
What does
And
supine position mean?
means face is up. Face is up in supine, and then prone, the face would be down. But she's laying on her back in this particular photograph.
Yes, sir.
And we're showing a close-up of the left side of her face. At the bottom of the frame is her left ear. Towards the left side of the frame is her chin. The eye and eyebrow are towards the upper right corner. And what we see in the center of the frame is her cheek. And on the cheek are a number of parallel cutaneous defects, which I would describe as abrasions. And they're abrasions that you would get if the body was dragged.
You used a term of art, cutaneous. What does cutaneous mean?
Cutaneous is just the skin. And
So you're seeing scratches on the skin is what you're suggesting?
yes, sir, I'm seeing scratches on the skin, and they're parallel scratches. So I think that the scratching surface that's scratching your skin is going in one direction, all going in one direction.
Okay, and that suggests the person's being dragged?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's look at, again, not publishing to the jury yet. Let's look at the next picture of
So now I'm
import. Yeah, and explain again that exhibit number and tell us what you see in that picture.
Yes, sir. I'm looking at exhibit number 342. And this is another picture taken at the time of autopsy. Again, the body is in the supine position. It's a close-up photo, and it shows the right side of the head. To the extreme right lower corner is the right ear. Towards the left side of the frame is the top of the head. Towards the extreme upper right corner of the frame is the nose. And so in the center of the frame, we're looking at the right side of the forehead, the right eye, and right eyebrow.
And so, what is it of, did you notice any defects to Ms. Josephson in those pictures?
Oh, yes, sir. There's many.
Now, explain to the jury another term of art what a defect is.
So a defect would be anything done to the skin that is not part of a normal process. So if I cut myself shaving, that would be a defect that I created. So it can be an abrasion from rubbing on the skin. It could be a stab wound. It could be a bruise. It could be a burn. So a defect is a very generic term for a number of different injuries that might have occurred to the skin.
So explain to the jury the defects, just without the picture, without the visual, but you can point to yourself if that will help at the moment, the defects that you observed when you performed this autopsy on Ms. Josephson, based on State's Exhibit number 342.
Yes, so she has bruising over the forehead and the right side of her face. She has a stab wound in the eyebrow. She has a number of other stab wounds on the right side of the face.
Now, may I interrupt you for a moment? You said a stab wound to the eyebrow.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so a moment ago you mentioned you take x-rays, correct?
Yes, sir.
And one of the reasons you take those, as you said, was to see if there may be damage to a weapon, to a knife?
Yes, sir. This is the primary reason. When I saw these stab wounds to the head, the skull is a very hard bone, very thick, and stabbing the skull frequently results in the knife bending or breaking. And so it immediately alerted me to take x-rays because we might have a piece of the knife actually embedded in the skull.
Thank you, sir. Please continue.
So I find that she also has an abrasion on the corner of the eye, and as I said, some bruising. The right eye is somewhat collapsed, and that's probably from some trauma to it. And then there's hemorrhaging to the periorbital tissues, the tissues around the eye. She's got a black eye, basically.
Now let's talk about that word you just mentioned, just there, hemorrhaging. Is there a way to determine if wounds take place if a person is living or post-mortem when they're dead?
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain that, and extravasated, I believe is the term that's used often. But explain those terms to the hemorrhaging versus extravasated to the jury, if you would, please.
Sure. So hemorrhage is an active process, and it requires a blood pressure. So when the person's alive, their heart's beating, they have a blood pressure. So all the blood vessels in the body are under a pressure, and the blood flows. Extravasated means that the blood has drained out of the blood vessel. So if we cut, say, a blood vessel and there's no blood pressure, blood will still drip out of it, but it's not under any kind of force. There is no hemorrhage going on. But if the person's got a blood pressure and you cut the blood vessel, then the blood will squirt out. It will be forcefully expelled from the blood vessel by the blood pressure. So it would kind of be like if you had a hose and the water was turned off and you cut the hose, you would expect a few drops of water to come out of the cut, but it wouldn't be much. If the hose was turned on and you cut it, then you would expect the water to come out forcefully. That's the difference between extravasated and hemorrhage.
All right. And so in this case, you said hemorrhaging?
Yes, sir. She has hemorrhage.
Okay. So which suggests she was alive when these wounds were inflicted?
Yes, sir.
All right. So please continue as you were describing State's Exhibit number 342.
There are also some wounds in the hair that we can see. And when I saw these wounds, I felt around in the hair. She has thick hair, and I could feel other wounds. So At that point, I know I'm going to have to remove some of the hair to get a good look at the wounds.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes, sir, I did.
And once you remove the hair, explain to the jury what you saw, just verbally. Explain what you saw.
So behind, on the right side of the head, behind and kind of above the right ear, there were multiple stab wounds.
Did you see anything else of interest in States 342 that you need to explain to the jury verbally?
No, sir, I think that's all.
Okay. Now let's turn to the next exhibit. Tell us again, just identify it. Do not publish that to the jury at the moment. What's the next picture you have in front of you?
Yes, sir, I'm looking now at 346.
So States 346. Take a look at that. Do you recognize that picture?
Yes, sir, I do.
Tell us what you see there.
Okay. It's another picture taken at the time of autopsy. And again, she's in the supine position. This is not as close up as the other photos. And at the top of the picture is the case number that we put in the photos, and it's the unique identifier that we try to get in all the pictures. The photo itself shows her top of her head to the left side of the frame, and her right shoulder at the extreme right lower corner. The number placard partially obscures her face, but in the center of the photo we can see her right ear and part of the right side of her head. We can see the area that I shaved off the hair, so we could look at the injuries there. We also see a number of injuries to the right side of the neck. Also in this picture behind the right ear, I've placed a letter, an adhesive letter, that's part of how we keep track of the wounds.
What letter is on there?
It's letter L.
Okay. And what does that signify, the letter L in this case?
So far I've gotten to the letter L. So I start at A. I have a sheet of these letters, and I just peel and stick them. It's just a peel and stick thing, and I will stick them on where the wounds are.
Okay.
And so
Sequentially, if you went, I guess that's probably numerically, you went A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L.
L.
So
yes.
this is the L stab wound is what we're speaking about.
Yes, we're on L now. This particular photograph shows us the L that I put there. And all the wounds either got their own individual letter, or the grouping of wounds got a letter, and then it was photographed. And that's so that if somebody wants to talk about these wounds, they can say, well, I'm talking about letter L. And then we can all look at the picture and know that this is the wound. Also in this picture is a probe. Part of what I mentioned before about determining the depth of the wound is place a probe in the wound, and then that way we were able to tell the depth of this wound and its approximate path.
Can you show the jury on yourself? Can you point to the area on yourself where that probe was placed?
Yes, it's right kind of below and behind the ear, right here. I don't know if that's...
So if the record could reflect that Dr. Beaver is pointing behind his left ear, kind of where the skull and the neckline meet, is that correct? Yes. And did you measure that probe at some point?
Yes.
Okay, how deep was that wound?
I'd have to look at my report, but I believe it was about 4 centimeters.
Okay. Do you have the report with you?
Yes, sir, I do.
Would it help your recollection to take a look at that?
Yes, it would.
Please.
It probes to a depth of 3.6 centimeters.
Okay. Can you show us just kind of with your fingers about what 3.6 centimeters is?
Yes, sir, I think it's about that far.
And what type of damage would a wound that goes 3.6 centimeters, you said centimeters?
Centimeters, yes, sir.
Centimeters into the area that you just showed. What type of effect could that have based on your medical experience?
Yes, it can go into the skull and into the brain, and that would be a serious wound.
Okay. Life-threatening?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any additional things that you'd like to point out as it relates to States 346 at this point?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, if you'll take a look at, I believe that's States 347 with the same instructions, just take a look at it and tell us verbally what you see.
Yes, sir. I'm looking now at 347.
Okay.
And this is a picture, again, taken at autopsy, very similar to the last one, showing the right side of her head and neck. Towards the top of this frame is her nose, towards the left side is the top of her head, towards the right side is her the base of her neck. And what I'm doing in this photograph is I'm holding the ear forward so we can see behind the ear. There is a stab wound that actually goes through the ear and then ends up going into the skin behind the ear. And so to demonstrate that, I've pulled the skin forward. We can see the L that I said previously that designates this wound, actually another wound. The ones behind the ear are different. But that's what we're seeing here. And we also see the stab wounds to her neck.
Court's indulgence. Your Honor, I'd like to have States Exhibits 341, 342, 346, and 347 admitted in evidence at this time.
They are marked for identification at this time.
And I'd like to have them entered into evidence at this time, Your Honor.
They're identification only at this time.
Yes, sir. And did you take these photos?
Yes, sir, I did.
Were they taken in a normal course of business?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now let's look at, let's talk a little bit more after we talk about the neck and the head. Let's talk about the torso next. So I'm going to hand you just a series of pictures at this point in time, and I'll tell you exactly which ones these ones are. All right, I'm going to hand you a.
You published the photographs that are in evidence. The exhibit numbers are.
Thank you. The exhibit number, I'm going to show you, Your Honor, Dr. Beaver, states number 343, states number 344, states number 349, states number 350, states number 351, states number 352, states number 353, states number 354, states number 355, states number 356, and states number 357.
They are in evidence.
I'd like to hand you these ones. All right, so let's start with the torso, if you would. If you parse through those, take a look at those, and let's take the pictures of the torso out first. And let's talk about what you observed in the torso.
Okay.
All right. So which number do you have in front of you, sir?
So I'm going to start with states 356, I believe it is.
All right. Can the witness step down here? Yes. All right. You can step down, so we can talk to the jury. And you can bring that photo with you. Now, looking at states 356. All right. Explain to the jury. Let's turn this way so you're facing the court reporter, and I'll hold it to. Tell the jury what you're seeing here.
So this is a photo taken at the time of autopsy.
Now, we'll have to rotate around. We may need to pause so each juror can see.
And the bottom is our placard. This is the placard I was talking about earlier, 275 sort of number. Then we're looking at her back, and now she's rolled up on her side. So, so we're looking at the left side, that's being her left arm at the top, and her right shoulder at the bottom. And we have cleaned her up. We have cleaned her up, so we washed off blood and things like that that might have obscured the injuries. But we still see a lot of these, this sort of the skin is sort of abraded off. And these yellow, sort of yellow, waxy looking things, that's all insect activity. So that's from ant, and this specific insects are ants in this case. So ants have taken and started to kind of take off the superficial layers of her skin, but there are also injuries here. And so we can see a stab wound here, a stab wound here, and a stab wound here, and a stab wound here. So she has a number of stab wounds on what I would call the flank area. So in this area of her back. These wounds, one of these goes actually into the lung, but then the other ones don't penetrate any internal organs. They go superficially, centimeter or two, but not into an internal organ. But the main thing is the insect activity. It's something to see there.
We're going to see that. We're going to do this with each of the photos.
Okay.
Would you like this?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so take a look at the next torso photo that you'd like to take a look at.
I think, yes, I think this is, most of the rest are not torso, so I think this is the next one.
All right, well, tell us what we're looking at if you will show us, and tell us what exhibit you're looking at. And tell them
So I am looking at 352, states 352. And this is a photo. This time the body is laying on its back. It's supine. So she's laying on the table back. We've got the placard in here with her identifier. And we're looking at the abdomen here. And her hand is kind of resting up on the abdomen. So we can see here some of that insect activity again on her wrist. So the ants in this case have done that. Then we can see the knuckles of her hand. She has a little defect right there on that knuckle, which it's indicative of some type of blow, perhaps. And then she has a little bit of discoloration in the knuckles, contusion, maybe.
And if we can step around this way so the jury.
Okay, so we have some swelling in the knuckles, maybe some discoloration, and we have this little defect here. And then the rest of her torso looks okay to me. And an indication of insect activity on her wrist.
If you could take the next photo in the order that you'd like to go through this slide.
Sure, I think we'll just start here. So this one is 343.
Okay, so states 343. All right.
So here, we're looking at the arm. And so first, we have the insect activity I've been talking about. And then we have two wounds, here and here. So superficial wounds where her arm came in contact with a knife or sharp instrument cut there. And so this is the back of the left arm. So it would be this area here. You can see her elbow here, and there's another injury here. So this 1, 2, 3 injuries on that arm. And the yellow waxy material is post-mortem from ants.
And let's take a look at the next photo.
So now, stage 349.
Stage 349. Okay, explain to the jury what we're looking at here.
So this is the right shoulder and part of the right neck. So she's laying on her back, and the right shoulder is here in the center. Up to the far right corner of the frame is her right ear and some of the injuries on her right neck. But
I'm going to come around just so we can make sure the jury's able to see this.
so what we have are multiple stab wounds in this small area. So in forensic pathology, we like to think of things that are close together in space, are close together in time. So these injuries would be from rapidly inflicting stab wounds. Because they're all very close together, some of them are overlapping. And there's a couple in here that caught my attention almost immediately, and they're parallel. They're two parallel cuts. And we will see others like that. And that, to me, I said, that's unique. It's very difficult to put wounds exactly spaced apart and exactly parallel. And so it made me think that we were dealing with an odd weapon and that we would be able to identify this weapon. So, so this is the first real kind of clue I started thinking about, is when I saw that right there.
Yes, sir.
And that made me start to think about the type of weapon being perhaps not just generic knife, but maybe now something unique. So she has other wounds in her neck here, but again, these are all grouped together, and I would group this as a single grouping of wounds because they're all in the same area, they're all about the same size, and they go into the musculature. They're not going to be fatal in and of themselves with medical treatment. They're not going to be lethal.
Now, if you look again at state exhibit number 349 that we've been referring to, are you able to see any defects to her ear there?
Yes, sir. So this one at the far right, you can see there's a defect in the ear here. That's a stab wound that actually goes through the ear and into the neck from behind the ear. And we were talking about a photo earlier where I tipped the ear forward, and that was to see that actually went through the ear.
Which exhibit number is that?
349, Your Honor. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In the same process, what exhibit are we looking at?
Yes, sir. This one is 344.
All right, 344, I'll hold that.
So here we're looking at the body again laying on the back. This time we're looking at the left arm. So we have the left arm and hand here. And the placard's in here. The arm is running across the frame and towards the bottom of the frame. And we can see the insect activity here, but she also has two small wounds on the forearm, and there's some hemorrhage into the soft tissues of the arm. Again, the wound's not lethal, but it just shows the level of activity.
Look at the next photo, please, sir.
Yes.
So this is we're looking at states number 350, 350. That's it. That's you.
So this wound, this photo, excuse me, you can see the peel and stick thing that I was talking about earlier. And the placard is at the bottom. She's lying on her back on the table, and we're looking at the right arm here. You can see one of the wounds that was up on the right shoulder, or in the grouping of the right shoulder right here. It's not a good angle photographically, so you can just see the discoloration of the skin. And then you see two parallel wounds in the elbow. So that to me, that was starting to, again, I'm starting to think about, at the time of the autopsy, I'm thinking these two parallel wounds to be that close together and parallel like that is very unusual, and it's going to mean something. I just need to figure it out. And then you can see her torso here. I don't see much there. Her hand would be off the frame to the bottom.
Thank you, sir. Let's grab that next exhibit, please.
Let's see. Can we do this one?
Yes, sir. What number is that?
This is number 357.
Right.
357. So this photo, we're looking at the foot, and it's the right foot, and she's laying on her back, and there are some stab wounds here, and here we see really well that two parallel stab wounds that I was talking about. And when I probe these wounds, excuse me, they run exactly parallel as well. So it's not like the knife went this way or this way, they're parallel in every respect. And so that's unique. And here I got the sense that there might be one and then two, but the knife didn't go very deep. So now I'm looking at this really being some type of a unique weapon. And
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anything else you'd like to discuss on that?
there's hemorrhage. You can see some pinkish discoloration around the wound, and that is hemorrhage. So we know she's got a blood pressure at this point, and blood is being forced out into the skin around the wound once the blood vessels are cut.
Thank you, sir.
So now we're going to look at the right hand. So placard's at the top. She's laying on her back. We're looking at the right arm. To the far right of the frame is about where her elbow starts, or and then to the right of the frame are the tips of her fingers. And we're looking at this wound on the palm of her hand. So this is two parallel stab wounds. Small, exactly parallel, and they probe all the way through the hand. And they go side by side all the way through the hand. So and there's hemorrhage around, so you know she has blood pressure at this point. So there's a couple things to take away from this. First of all, it's a defensive type injury. You're being attacked with a knife, you put your hand up to try to reflexively block that attack. And the knife goes through your hand. That's what happened here. And both of those wounds are parallel. They're the same kind of parallel, close together stab wounds that we saw on the foot and the shoulder. And here they're really it's a really good demonstration. So I took another photograph closer up.
Would you get that one, please? Thank you. those
Yes,
side by
sir.
side?
Yes, sir.
So we're looking at State's Exhibit number 354 and 355.
So I took a closer picture of the palm of the hand. We're looking at the palm of the right hand again. Towards the top would be her wrist, towards the bottom, tips of her fingers. And these wounds are exactly 2 little cuts that are parallel to each other. And they're a set distance apart. Doesn't vary. And they go all the way through the hand. So this wound is what you would expect for someone trying to defend themselves from a stab, and the knife hits them. But in this case, the knife is unique because it's got these 2 blades. It would have to have 2 blades or 2 pieces to the blade that would be parallel. And so at this point, I knew we would find, if we could find the knife, we could match it up with this wound, because there's just, and I actually went to Google and I looked at about 1,000 pictures of knives, and I couldn't find any knife that was like this, that had those kinds of parallel blades. So, we'll look at the next one.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to look at 353.
Yes, sir.
353. So 353 is the right hand again. This time we're looking at the back of the right hand. So remember I said that the wounds to the palm went all the way through and came out the back. And so now we're looking at where it comes out in the back. And again, there are 2 parallel wounds side by side. And so coming out like that, there would have to be 2 parallel blades. So we have the hemorrhage around it, so she has a blood pressure, and the wounds are exactly parallel, and they're that set distance apart. So that would take some kind of a unique instrument to do that.
Then all of those match photos?
I think I have one more.
Okay.
This is 351. So here is the left arm, and it shows us the insect activity. Sometimes based on the positioning of the body and what the insects have access to, can tell us something. So sometimes if a body is moved from one place to another, if the insects get on the body at one place and do damage some skin, and then the body is moved to another place where the insects don't have access, that can help us to piece together what happened. So that's why this photo was taken. There aren't any real significant injuries here, just hand activity. So that's the left arm. So the pattern here is that all injuries are occurring on the right side of her body, right shoulder, right side of her face and neck, down this right hand, left arm relatively spare.
Can you offer an opinion as to what would happen for those major injuries to take place on the right side of one's body?
That would be the side exposed to the attack.
Could I see the jury box, if you would, please? Now, sir, I'm going to show you what's been marked in State's Exhibit number 294. Would you like to hear it, please?
Yes, sir. Here.
I'm sorry. State's Exhibit number 295. I'm handing you now what's State's Exhibit number 295. You referenced multiple times. Well, tell us what you're seeing with that that interests you as you look at this.
This knife has two blades, and they are relatively parallel. They are bent at the tip, and they're the size appropriate for the wounds that I saw. This is the weapon.
And as you look at this, based on your 29 years as a forensic pathologist, do you have an opinion of that weapon and the injuries that Samantha Josephson sustained?
Yes, the parallel cuts are made by this.
Now, did you see, may I have stage number 225 back, please? Did you see some singular stab wounds as well?
Yes, and many, in fact, the majority of the stab wounds were singular stab wounds.
Let me hand that to you.
So,
Please speak to the jury.
yes, sir. So once this is pulled apart like this, now it's a single-bladed weapon. So that's one of the things that was confusing me at the autopsy was I thought there must be two weapons because there was the parallel blade ones and then there were the single ones. So I thought it's unusual to have two weapons. But now I think it's explained to my satisfaction that this is the knife in this conformation would make the parallel wounds that I saw, and then if it's in this conformation, it could then make the single stab wounds.
Thank you, sir. Now, as you perform this autopsy, well, I'll correct that question. How much blood does a human body only contain?
It's about 4 or 5 liters.
4 or 5 liters?
Yes, sir.
And so in U.S. metrics, in American metrics, what is that?
It's probably close to a gallon.
Okay. And so as you perform the autopsy on Ms. Josephson, how much blood was found in her body?
It was not a lot. I found 20 milliliters in the pleural cavity, right pleural cavity, and really we had difficulty obtaining the blood that we used for toxicology.
And so 20 milliliters is about how much, if you could, again in layman's terms, tell us what 20 milliliters looks like?
Maybe an eighth of a cup.
Okay. So about this much?
Yes, yeah, a couple tablespoons, maybe 3.
So based on the wounds that you saw and the fact that about 5 liters of blood should be in a human body,
Yes,
where
sir.
would you expect the blood to be found in this type of activity, in this type of case?
She's going to bleed out.
She's going to bleed out, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And one of the neck wounds involves the carotid artery and the jugular vein. We haven't talked about it much, but that wound would produce a lot of blood flow.
Okay. And you'd expect to find that blood where?
Wherever it took place, wherever these wounds were inflicted, the blood would come out immediately, just like the hose analogy.
All right. Now, you mentioned the neck wounds and the jugular vein. Is there something called a hyoid bone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk to the jury about the hyoid bone and what you observed with that.
Yes, sir. For a forensic pathologist, the hyoid bone has a great significance. It's a little horseshoe-shaped bone. Literally, it would fit inside my hand right here, and it sits up high in the neck.
And so if you'll just show us.
Sure.
Yeah,
It
just show
sits
us.
up high in the neck.
Yes, sir.
And it's hooked to the back of the tongue and to part of the larynx. And it's a free-floating bone. It doesn't articulate with anything. It's not like an elbow or something. It's hinged by muscle. So there's muscle of the tongue on one side of it, muscle on the throat on the other side of it. So, and for us, it's the sine qua non, and that which names, of manual strangulation. So if you strangle somebody, you put your hands on their neck and you squeeze, that will fracture the hyoid bone. So when we see a fractured hyoid bone, it is manual strangulation until proven otherwise. The bone, because it sits so high up in the neck, it's very punches and blows to the neck don't affect it. Because it's mobile and it's attached to muscle, again, blows to the neck generally don't affect it. You have to get that squeezing motion to fracture it. So she had a defect in her hyoid bone on the right side. In her case, though, I'm not of the opinion that it's a strangulation. I think it came from one of the stab wounds to her neck. The knife actually got up high enough to sever the hyoid bone.
So it's your suggestion that State's Exhibit number 295, this knife would have gotten high enough to sever that bone?
Yes, sir. And so it doesn't say for us that, for me, it doesn't say absolutely. I couldn't tell you absolutely there was no manual strangulation involved, but I can tell you I would favor that it was done by a knife, by the stab wound. But it would be high to do because that bone is relatively protected. Even in ligature, when we see a ligature strangulation or someone committing suicide with a ligature,
What is a ligature? I'm sorry. Explain what a ligature is.
Oh, so if we put a rope around the neck,
Right.
common, very common way people commit suicide, common way for people to attack each other. And even then, you don't see fractured hyoid bone because the ligature, the rope, or the wire, or the foam cord slips up over the bone or slips up underneath the bone, but it doesn't get the hyoid bone. So hyoid bone for a forensic pathologist is manual strangulation until proven otherwise.
All right. And so here you said there was a severed jugular?
Yes, and carotid artery as well.
All right. And so based on your 29 years as a forensic pathologist, are those wounds lethal wounds?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when we talk about the types of lethal wounds that you saw, we talked about an injury to the brain,
Yes, sir.
and we talked about the injuries to the hyoid bone
Yes, sir.
and the jugular. Any or both of those could be considered lethal wounds?
Yes.
Okay. And the wounds that you saw consistent with stage number 295, the knife you talked about, do you have an opinion right now that you can tell this jury of what caused Samantha Josephson's death?
Yes. Multiple stab wounds. I made the cause of death multiple stab wounds.
Court's indulgence, Your Honor.
Gentlemen, we're going to have you go to the jury room for a break now. Please do not discuss the case.